Have you ever stepped into a public restroom and felt it? That sudden chill, like you're not alone, even when the place looks empty? Tonight, you'll hear 5 terrifying true stories that prove those instincts might be right. From footsteps under locked stalls, to figures watching through the cracks, to voices whispering in places no one should be, these are the disturbing restroom horror stories that will make you think twice before ever going in alone again. You think you know what fear is until you're alone in a public restroom at 2 a.m. and hear footsteps that don't belong to anyone visible. What I'm about to share with you are real encounters that happen to real people in places we all have to use eventually. These stories will make you think twice about ever using a public bathroom alone again. Public restrooms are strange, liminal spaces where the ordinary rules of society seem suspended. They're places of vulnerability where we're forced to be alone with our thoughts and, unfortunately, sometimes with things we never wanted to encounter. The people who experienced what I'm about to tell you weren't looking for trouble. They were just trying to use the facilities and get on with their lives. Also, if you like this video and want to show the support, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss more true scary stories like these. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's begin. Let me start with Melissa, who was driving home from a work trip late one Friday night. She had been on the road for nearly 6 hours when she finally decided to pull over at a small roadside rest area just outside of Dayton, Ohio. The place was almost deserted. Only a single pickup truck sat idling at the far end of the lot, its headlights off, exhaust puffing in the cold air. Melissa parked her sedan a few spaces from the restroom building, telling herself it would be quick, just in and out. The moment she stepped inside, the air shifted. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, flickering in a way that made the tiled floor look unsteady. The smell of strong cleaner mixed with something damp and stale, like the building itself hadn't been fully abandoned, but hadn't been cared for either. She called out a soft, "Hello?" half to break the silence, half to check if anyone was inside. No response. The only sound was the hollow drip of water echoing from somewhere deeper in the building. Melissa chose the middle stall, shutting the door with a metallic clang. Almost immediately, she heard it, a faint scraping sound beneath her stall. It was so soft that at first she thought it was her imagination, but then it came again. Slow, deliberate, like something dragging lightly across the tiles. She froze, eyes dropping toward the small gap at the floor. Nothing moved, no feet, no shadows. Just the faint reflection of the overhead light. She tried to steady her breathing, but the sound continued, inching closer until it seemed to come from directly beneath her. And then it stopped. Melissa sat in silence, heart thudding in the chest. She was seconds from leaving when she heard it again. Footsteps. Not from the entrance, not from the sinks, from the stall right beside hers. The problem was, she was sure that stall was empty when she came in. The footsteps were soft at first, like bare feet on tile, and they paced back and forth slowly, as if whoever was in there wasn't in any rush. Then came the sound of a low shuffle, almost like someone crouching. Melissa leaned slightly, peering through the crack in the door. The stall beside her looked empty. She could see straight through to the wall. Her stomach tightened. She gathered her things, trying to make as little noise as possible, and unlatched the door. The restroom was colder now, the buzzing of the lights harsher, louder. She stepped toward the sinks, forcing herself not to look at the row of stalls. Halfway to the door, the sound came again. A stall door creaking open. She turned just enough to see the one at the far end swing slowly outward. No one came out. The inside was completely dark, though the rest of the restroom was lit by the buzzing lights. Melissa didn't wait to see more. She bolted out the door, the echo of her footsteps pounding against the tile. As she reached her car, she glanced back. The pickup truck that was idling before was gone. The lot was empty. Melissa locked her doors, started the engine, and sped back onto the highway, but she swears to this day she could still hear the faint scrape of something dragging across tile long after she left that rest stop behind.
This account comes from a woman named Emily, who swears that what happened one night at a small-town gas station is the reason she will never, ever use a public restroom alone again. She was driving home from visiting a friend in another state. It was late, close to midnight, and the stretch of highway she was on was nearly empty. Her phone had almost no signal, and the exits felt farther apart the longer she drove. When her fuel light came on, she felt her chest tighten. She passed 2 closed exits before finally spotting a faded sign for a 24-hour gas station. Relieved, she pulled off. At first glance, the place didn't look right. The lot was nearly empty except for her car, and one buzzing light over the pumps flickered so badly it left the ground in stuttering shadows. The convenience store was lit up inside, but through the windows she couldn't see a cashier. The aisles looked empty, abandoned. She debated leaving, but the gas gauge was already hovering on empty. She parked by the pumps and got out, hugging her coat tighter against the cold night air. That's when she noticed the bathroom. It wasn't inside the store. It was its own small building off to the side of the lot, a squat concrete structure with a single door and a yellow light buzzing overhead. A handwritten sign taped to the store's front door read, "Restrooms outside." She told herself it would just take a minute. The door creaked when she pushed it open, and the first thing that hit her was the smell. Sharp cleaning chemicals layered over something damp, metallic, and stale. The fluorescent lights inside flickered like they hadn't been replaced in years, and every few seconds the room plunged into a brief half-darkness before buzzing back to life. The place was long and narrow, with 3 stalls and a row of sinks with cracked mirrors. The tiles were grimy, the grout blackened, and the air was so cold she could see her breath. Emily slipped into the middle stall and latched the door. She had just sat down when she heard it. A scrape. It was faint, like something dragging across the tile floor. She froze, listening. The door hadn't opened. She hadn't heard footsteps, but the sound was there, low and deliberate, moving just beyond her stall. Her first thought was that someone else had come in quietly. She leaned forward, glancing down at the gap between the floor and the door. Nothing. Just flickering light reflecting off dirty tile. She tried to shake it off, telling herself old buildings make noises. But then it came again, louder this time. A hinge creaking. The stall to her left shifted slightly, its door moving as if it were being nudged shut. Emily's stomach knotted. She was certain all the stalls had been open when she walked in. Now one of them wasn't. She stayed perfectly still, listening so hard her ears ached. That's when she realized she wasn't alone. From the far end of the row, through the thin crack in a stall door, she saw it. An eye, watching her. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a quick glance, not some trick of the light. It was steady, unblinking, locked right on her. She couldn't move, couldn't even swallow. Then, as slowly as it had appeared, the eye vanished. The stall door eased shut with a soft click. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She scrambled to stand, fumbling with the latch until it gave way. When she stepped out, the room was silent. All 3 stall doors were closed now. She couldn't tell which one was occupied, or if any of them were. She forced herself to the sinks, keeping her eyes forward. The cracked mirror in front of her showed her own pale reflection, but in the corner of the glass, something shifted. A tall, dark shape standing behind her. She spun around. Nothing. Just the stalls. And then the noise began. Bang! One stall door slammed so hard the walls shook. Bang! Another followed, then another, each door crashing open and shut in violent rhythm. Emily stumbled backwards, her hands shaking, and bolted for the door. The lights overhead flickered faster, buzzing and snapping as the banging grew louder, echoing through the narrow room until it was deafening. She shoved the door open and stumbled into the cold night air. Outside, the lot was still deserted. Her car was the only one there. The convenience store lights glowed steadily, like nothing was wrong. But when she looked back at the restroom building, the single floodlight above the door sputtered, flickered twice, and went out, leaving the place in complete darkness. Emily sprinted to her car, locked the doors, and started the engine with trembling hands. She didn't even stop for gas. She sped back onto the highway, headlights cutting through the falling snow, her pulse racing as if something might follow her out onto the road. She made it home safely, but she swears she's never been the same since. To this day, she refuses to stop at isolated gas stations no matter how desperate she is. She says she doesn't know who or what was watching her from that stall, but she can still remember the way that I looked at her. And when she tells this story, she always ends it with the same warning. Sometimes the scariest part of a road trip isn't the drive. It's the places you stop when you think you're safe, because you never really know who else is in there with you. Have you ever walked into a fast food bathroom and instantly felt like something was wrong? Not just dirty floors or bad lighting, but the kind of wrong that makes your stomach tighten before you even taken a step inside. That's what happened to Lauren last summer. Lauren was 26, driving cross-country to visit her sister. She had been on the road since early morning, and by late afternoon she was hungry, tired, and in desperate need of a bathroom. She pulled off at a small-town exit in Nebraska and saw a familiar burger chain glowing in the distance. Bright lights, neat windows, cars in the lot. It looked safe enough. She ordered food, but before she ate, she went straight to the restroom. The hallway leading there was narrow and oddly quiet compared to the chatter of the dining area. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and the air smelled faintly of mop water, like the floors had just been cleaned. Nothing unusual, until she opened the restroom door. Inside were 4 stalls. 3 of them were locked. Lauren thought nothing of it at first. Busy restaurant, right? Except when she bent down to check, there were no feet visible under any of the doors. Just empty tile. She froze for a moment, uneasy. She shook it off and went into the one open stall. But as soon as she latched the door, she heard it. A faint shuffle. Not the normal sounds of someone shifting their weight or grabbing for toilet paper. This was slow, dragging, almost like someone adjusting their stance inch by inch. It was coming from the locked stalls. Lauren held her breath. She wanted to believe it was her imagination, but then it came again. A scrape. A soft, deliberate movement just feet away, though she couldn't see anyone. When she finished, she stepped out quickly, hurrying to the sinks. As she washed her hands, the restroom was dead quiet. Too quiet. Then came the sound that made her skin crawl. Creak. One of the locked stall doors opened behind her. In the mirror, she saw it, a man stepping out of the middle stall. Lauren's stomach dropped. He wasn't wearing a restaurant uniform, just dark jeans and a hoodie with the hood pulled low. His steps were slow, unhurried, as if he had been waiting all along. Their eyes met in the mirror. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just stared at her reflection like he was trying to memorize her. Lauren spun around, ready to yell, but he walked past her, silent. The door creaked as he left, and then she was alone again. Her hands shook as she turned off the faucet. She bolted back into the dining room, heart pounding. At the counter, she spotted the manager and asked, voice trembling, "Hey, is one of your employees checking the women's restroom?" The manager frowned. No, we don't have anyone scheduled for maintenance today. Why? Lauren explained what she had seen, describing the man in the hoodie. The manager's face went pale. We don't have any employees who look like that, and we don't allow men in the women's restroom. Lauren didn't touch her food. She went straight to her car. As she pulled out of the lot, she glanced in her rearview mirror. The man in the hoodie was standing outside the restaurant, under the glow of the sign, watching her drive away. She pressed the gas harder, eyes fixed on the road. To this day, Lauren swears she wasn't alone in that restroom. The locked stalls, the shuffling, the silent man who appeared only when she was most vulnerable. None of it makes sense. And what unsettles her the most isn't just that no one knew who he was. It's the thought that he might not have been waiting for her specifically, just for the next person, desperate enough to step into that bathroom alone.
Have you ever been in a public restroom when the place around you is completely empty? No chatter, no footsteps, just the hollow echo of your own movements. It's strange how vulnerable it makes you feel. And if you've ever been in one of those massive mall bathrooms late at night, with bad lighting and rows of stalls stretching down further than they should, you already know that sense of unease. This account comes from Rachel, a woman in her early 30s who worked at a suburban mall in Texas. She'd been at the jewelry store there for years, often closing shifts when the mall was already locked up to shoppers. One night last summer, after a particularly long day of inventory, Rachel stayed later than usual. By the time she clocked out, the mall was silent. Storefronts were gated, the fountains had been shut off, and the music that normally played faintly through the overhead speakers had stopped hours earlier. Rachel parked her bag in the back hallway and decided to use the restroom before heading home. She knew the staff corridors well, narrow cement hallways used by employees and security. They branched like veins behind the bright storefronts, always dim, always cold. The restroom was tucked at the end of one such hallway. It wasn't new or modern. It was the kind with yellowish fluorescent lighting and faded tile floors, like it hadn't been remodeled since the early 90s. She pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The first thing she noticed was how quiet it was. Too quiet. Normally, she'd hear the low hum of air vents or the buzz of lights, but that night, it was just her footsteps echoing against the tile. The restroom had a long row of stalls, 10, maybe 12, all with heavy metal doors. Only a few were slightly ajar. The others were closed, and from her angle, they looked sealed shut. Rachel chose a stall near the middle. She wasn't the nervous type, but something about the emptiness of the restroom made her rush. When she stepped out to wash her hands, she caught it. Movement in the mirror. Her eyes flicked up, certain it was her imagination, but then she saw it clearly. At the very end of the row, in the last stall, a pair of bare feet stood visible through the gap at the bottom of the door. She froze. The feet weren't positioned the way they should be. Instead of facing forward toward the stall door, they were angled sideways, almost backward, like the person inside was turned around, standing on the toilet or pressed against the wall. Her voice wavered when she called out, "Hello? Are you okay?" No answer. The feet didn't move. The silence pressed down on her until she couldn't take it anymore. Slowly, cautiously, she stepped toward the row of stalls. Each one she passed was empty, doors hanging open, until she reached the last one. Her stomach dropped. When she pushed the door inward, the stall was empty. But the toilet seat was smeared with muddy footprints,
like someone had been standing on it, and on the tiled wall above, at shoulder height, were wet handprints, as if someone had been blindly feeling their way around in complete darkness. Rachel's hands shook as she backed away, but what she found next unsettled her even more. Tucked behind the toilet, partially hidden in shadow, was a small pile of belongings. Old, rumpled clothes, crumpled food containers, and a spiral notebook, damp at the edges. She flipped it open with trembling fingers. Inside were pages filled with messy handwriting, observations about mall employees, notes about when they arrived, when they left, which hallways they used. Some of the entries described people Rachel knew by name. One note read, "Woman at jewelry store closes late, stays after 10 most nights." Her blood ran cold. That was her. Rachel slammed the notebook shut and nearly dropped it. She ran from the restroom, down the silent corridor, and straight to the security office. 2 guards followed her back to investigate. But when they opened the stall, the belongings were gone. No footprints, no handprints, no notebook. The restroom looked completely normal, as if no one had ever been there. The guards assured her she must have been overtired, maybe seeing things. But Rachel knew what she had seen. A week later, she found out she wasn't the only one. A cashier from a shoe store mentioned hearing strange shuffling in that same restroom after closing, followed by a stall door slamming when she was the only one inside. A janitor claimed they had heard faint breathing behind a stall door that opened to nothing, and another employee swore they saw someone slip out of a maintenance panel behind the toilets, vanishing into the hidden crawl spaces of the mall. Mall security later reviewed hours of footage. On multiple nights, the same figure could be seen darting in and out of service corridors. Tall, thin, always in baggy clothing. The footage would catch him for seconds before he slipped into darkness again. But the most disturbing part? In one clip, he was seen leaving the women's restroom minutes before Rachel went inside that night. The individual was never caught. Security swept the utility spaces, but the tunnels and panels behind the stores stretched like a maze, impossible to search completely. Employees reported sightings for months afterwards. Sometimes the reports were brushed off as paranoia. Other times, guards would respond too late, finding nothing but an unlocked panel or footprints leading to nowhere. Rachel quit her job at the mall a month later. She never set foot in that restroom again. She says what terrifies her most isn't just that someone had been living inside the mall for weeks, maybe months, watching employees. It's that she came face to face with him or something, and for one unbearable moment, he was standing barefoot in that stall, watching her, silently, from the wrong side of the door. And to this day, whenever she finds herself alone in a public restroom, she can't shake the memory. The silence, the bare feet facing the wrong way, the handprints reaching up the walls. It's a reminder that even in the places we think are safe, someone or something might already be there, waiting. So the next time you step into a restroom late at night, especially in a mall or theater when the crowds are gone, look carefully. Check the stalls before you choose one. Listen for the quiet scrape of movement in the corners, because sometimes the person you think is locked away behind that stall door isn't using the restroom at all. They might just be watching.
Have you ever pulled into a quiet rest area or park bathroom and felt your stomach tighten for no clear reason? Maybe the air felt heavier than it should. Maybe the silence pressed too close. A lot of people dismiss that feeling as nerves, but sometimes it's your instincts warning you. Consider what happened to Lisa and David, a couple who experienced something they'll never forget at a remote rest area along Highway 35 in Minnesota. It was a Sunday night in late September. They just wrapped up a weekend trip to a friend's cabin and were making the 3-hour drive back home. The highway was mostly empty at that hour, just stretches of dark forest pressing against the road, the occasional passing truck, and the glow of their headlights cutting through the night. Around 10 o'clock, they pulled into a rest area. From the road, it looked ordinary enough. One long lot, a single building for bathrooms and vending machines, and one lonely streetlight buzzing overhead. But the second they pulled in, they noticed how empty it was. Their car was the only one in the lot. The vending machines were dark. Even the air felt still, like the woods surrounding them were holding their breath. David stayed by the car while Lisa went inside. She didn't love outdoor restrooms, but she figured it would be quick. She pushed through the heavy door, the hinges squealing like they hadn't been oiled in years, and stepped into the dim space. The bathroom was cold, colder than the night outside. The air carried that sharp chemical bite of cleaning supplies, mixed with something damp and sour. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, buzzing faintly, and the whole room felt too quiet. There was a row of stalls, half of them with doors hanging crooked on their hinges. At the far end, one stall door was closed. Lisa thought nothing of it at first, until she noticed the way the silence seemed to gather there. She went into the second stall, finished quickly, and stepped to the sinks. That's when she caught it. Movement reflected in the cracked mirror above her. At the very back of the room, in the last stall, stood a figure. It was tall, much taller than she expected, its head nearly brushing the top of the door. The figure was motionless, facing the wall, and the strangest part? It looked like it was wearing old-fashioned clothing, the kind of outfit you'd expect to see in a photo from the early 1900s. Lisa's chest tightened. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a shaky whisper came out. "Hello?" The figure didn't move, didn't turn. Then, very faintly, she heard it. A whisper. Not words she could understand, just a low stream of sound, like someone speaking to themselves in a language she didn't recognize. It slid under the buzz of the lights, under her own heartbeat, curling into the silence of the room. Lisa blinked, and in that split second, the figure was gone. The stall stood empty, door half ajar. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she staggered back toward the entrance. That's when another sound rose, sharp against the silence. Drip, drip, drip. Her eyes darted toward the sinks. One faucet was dripping steadily, though when she had first entered, the sinks had been bone dry, their drains rimmed with dust. The drip echoed far louder than it should have, bouncing off the tiles until the whole room seemed to carry it. Lisa's panic finally broke. She screamed, a raw, terrified sound that tore through the silence of the rest area. David, waiting outside, bolted toward the building. He shoved open the heavy door and found her standing frozen in the doorway, eyes wide and unblinking, her body trembling. She couldn't even form words at first, just pointed toward the far stall. When David checked, the room was empty. The stall stood open. Nothing inside. The faucet had stopped dripping. Back in the car, Lisa described what she had seen. The figure, the old-fashioned clothing, the whisperings. David tried to calm her down, telling her stress and exhaustion could play tricks, but Lisa knew what she'd seen. Later, when they told friends what had happened, someone urged them to report it to the local authorities. That's when they learned the most disturbing detail. That rest area had a reputation. Over the past decade, multiple unexplained disappearances had been linked to it. 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman, had stopped to use those exact facilities and were never seen again. Cars left behind, doors locked, but no trace of the people. The stories unsettled them more than they admitted, because Lisa realized her instincts had been right the moment she stepped into that restroom. Something wasn't normal there, and she wasn't the only one who felt it. Other travelers have reported eerily similar experiences in outdoor restrooms across different states and even decades apart. Sudden drops in temperature, faint voices echoing when the building was empty, doors slamming shut with no draft, the sensation of being watched from just out of sight. One man described entering a stall only to find water pooling on the floor, even though the pipes had been dry. Another woman swore she heard breathing in the stall next to hers, but when she bent down to check, there were no feet, no shadows, just empty space. The consistencies are what make these accounts so disturbing. Different people, different places, but the same details repeated. The whispers, the phantom footsteps, the locked doors that shouldn't be locked, and the wet marks appearing on bone-dry tile. What unsettled Lisa most wasn't just the figure she saw, but the way it seemed tied to that space, as if the building itself held it, as if the walls weren't keeping people safe, but keeping something in. She still won't stop at remote rest areas, even during the day, and when she tells her story, her warning is always the same. If you ever walk into a restroom and something feels off, trust that feeling. Don't wait to see what happens. Get out. Because whatever I saw that night, it wasn't meant to be there, and I wasn't meant to see it. If these stories made you uneasy the next time you step into a restroom, you're not alone. These are the places we all trust to be ordinary, but as you've just heard, ordinary can quickly turn terrifying. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss more true scary stories told just like this. And let me know in the comments which story left you with chills.